All right, everyone. I'm back again. Oh, 50 subscriber. Cool. All right. So here's the story of the inside the Great Train Robbery of 1963. Um, I see you. So the train robbery. Um, can you see the story on there, Jason? Can you see the story? All right. So on the great inside the Great Train Robbery of 1963, the biggest railway heist of all times. On August 8th, 1963, 15 men raided a postal train passing through a small English town, making off with the modern day equivalent of $58 million in what is known today as the Great Train Robbery. Now, during the early morning of August 8th, 1963, British postal train traveling from Scotland to England suddenly stopped on a red signal in a small village. When the train co-engineer stepped out of to investigate the issue, masked man attacked him and took control of the train. Until 15 masked assailants cracked open the train car and stole 2.6 million pounds, equivalent to 58 million today. The train at the center of the Great Train Robbery Railway Bridge in Leeburn, England. That's what that is right there. So the night of the Great Train Robbery, on around 3 a.m. on August 3rd, the British mail train traveling from Glasgow to London stopped at a red signal near Caddington, England. The co-engineer of the train, David Whitby, jumped from the lead car to investigate the signal that had delayed them. When he got close, he noticed a leather glove laying against the light, a 6-volt battery also hanging from the uh, contraption, well, the arm, I guess. Whitby went to make a call to the rail line to see what the issue was, but he noticed that someone had cut the phone line. Confused at what he was seeing, Whitby started making his way back to the train, but was quickly interrupted by a hand on his arms, clamping down his arm. If you shoot, I'll kill you, a strange man told him, according to the magazine. Several masked men then emerged from the shadows, accompanying Whitby back to the lead car, where head engineer Jack Mills was waiting, unaware of the danger. Police photographed the gloves used to cover the light stopping the train. There's the glove right there. That's the glove right there. The masked man rushed into the car with gel and began beating Mills over the head until he became unconscious. Now, the Great Train Robbery had begun. How the assailants carried out the most lucrative robbery in history? After seizing the control of the lead car, the man detached the first two cars from 12-car train. Then realized they had a problem on their hands. The robber in their ranks, assigned with learning to drive a train, realized that the mail locomotive was much more complex. They needed Mills. Recognized this issue. The man rose Mills from semi-conscious and forced him to drive the train half a mile down the track. As he bleed, there are more masked men waiting the train arrival. Now, at the bridge in Leadburn, more men emerged from the darkness using iron tools to force the second car doors open. They subdued the staff inside quickly and formed a human chain, transferring bags of money from the train to their vehicles. In total, The man lugged 120 sacks of cash out of the train into 3 vehicles, a military truck and 2 Range Rovers. The broken window is where the postal train was. Now, the robbery of this train was no crime of opportunity. The weekend prior to the theft had been a bank holiday, resulting in a buildup of mail and cash filled with envelopes. The man knew what if they managed to pull off the robbery and would be very lucrative. Less than a half hour after stopping the train, the masked man made out with $2.6 million. Later, guard patrolling the other cars still sanitary in Cuttington realized the gravity of the situation and called authorities. For the authorities of Scotland Yard, the Great Train Robbery seemed like a near possible crime to solve. After all, the man had worn a mask and very few witnesses were present. However, there was that one clue to where the thieves may have gone. According to the British Transport Police, upon leaving the train, one masked man told the postal worker in the second car not to call the police until 30 minutes after they left. They made authorities to believe that the thieves likely had a local hangout. The hunt was on. Now, the gang of thieves on the run. Image of this farmhouse, the gang members hide in the following the robbery. Immediately following the Great Train Robbery, authorities began canvassing local neighborhoods, dredging up files, past vendors, and staking out several homes that they deemed suspicious. But this seemingly led nowhere. Now, authorities searched at Square One, their first step being crime scene analysts giving eyewitness testimony. Authorities were confident that whoever planned the crime likely had an inside prospect of the mail industrious. After all, the man knew when the train would come, which car contained the sack of cash. However, now how little security there was on this train and the right place to stop the train. Now, while the police worked out on the theory, important leads arose. Now, the day after the crime, a herdsman living roughly 20 miles from the scene telephoned the police after becoming suspicious of the nearby Leather Sly farm. He seen men coming in and out of the home at bizarre hours following the robbery. Police respond to this tip. The home authorities found 20 empty mailbags on the ground, and the getaway vehicle involved in this crime sat covered in the yard. Inside home, police found sleeping bags, food provisions, and games. And while the robberies attempting to wipe their fingerprints from the home, police extract several fingerprints from a game of Monopoly and a ketchup bottle. With the new evidence, authorities slowly apprehend each robbery one by one. The punishment for the Great Train Robbery: from left to right, Buster Edwards, Tommy Wiseby, Jim White, Bruce Reynolds, Roger Cordell, Charles Wilson, and Jim Hassan, the 7 men involved in the Great Train Robbery in 1963. The first robbery police apprehend for the Great Train Robbery was Roger Cordell, a florist from Bournemouth. His landlord tipped off the police after he had given her rent payment 3 months in advance. After the police arrested Cordell, they used the knowledge of his associates to capture the 12 more robberies: Gordon, Charlie, Ray, John, Brian, and Leonard, and John and Ronnie, and Tommy and Jim, William and Bob. Those men faced trial for the Great Train Robbery in 1964, with all 5 receiving sentences for 30 years in prison. Instantly, the court acquitted John of the crime, citing insignificant evidence. Those harsh sentences led to prison escape from both Charles and Ronnie in Wilson's case. His associate helped him escape to Canada. By the time before authorities located and extradited him back to England, Ronnie escaped from prison in 1965 by scaling the wall and jumping into a furniture truck. He fled to France, then Australia, and finally Brazil. He managed to evade authorities until 2001 when, in poor health, aware his would-be arrest. He came back to England for medical treatment and was in prison once more. However, the authorities did not arrest the ringleader of the operation until 5 years after the crime. The police, Bruce Reynolds, and the court sentenced him to 10 years in prison. Authorities still do not know the identity of some members of the gang, including the Postal Service informant. The conclusion of the Great Train Robbery of 1963 is a tragic one. Following the crime incarceration, several robbers went on to meet violent ends, according to Buckinghamshire Live. Buster Edwards committed suicide in 1990. Charles Wilson was shot to death by a hitman in Spain. Brian died in a car accident with his wife and children. For the victims of Jack, Mills, and David, the robbery also had a lasting impact. Mills never fully recovered from his injuries, suffering from headaches until the death in 1970. Now, David, traumatized by the event, died from a heart attack in 1972 at the age of 34. And while the world's largest train robbery is a fascinating story of the robbers coming together to pull off a highly organized heist, one must remember the lasting impact it had on the lives of those who experienced it. After learning the Great Train Robbery, discovered the story the Dalton Gang, a group of American outlaws in the West who robbed two banks at once, then read the Luwapa heist, when a group of monsters stole $6 million from John F. Kennedy Airport. Luwapa? Okay. Why the Luwapa heist was far crazier than the Goodfellas depicted. Okay, well, in the Malaysian robbery made famous by the Goodfellas, the thieves behind the Luwapa heist stole $6 million from New York Kennedy Airport, December 11th, 1978. In the pre-dawn darkness of December 11th, 1970, a stolen black Ford Econoline lingered outside the New York John F. Kennedy International Airport. Inside, several men waited for a signal, their faces covered in black ski masks. On December 11th, 1978, thieves stole $5.875 million in cash and jewelry from the cargo terminal in German airline Lufthansa at New York Kennedy. Finally, at 3:12 a.m., the van backed up to deliveries interests of the Lufthansa airline terminal. The masked man got out, reached from them armed with loaded weapons, and entered the terminal. 64 minutes later, they quietly slipped out, loaded the van with $5 million, untraceable cash, and another $875 in jewelry, and got away with what was, at the time, the largest sum ever stolen on U.S. soil. This dramatic robbery soon became known as the Luwapa heist. Later immortalized Martin Scorsese in 1990 criminal classic Godfellas. And to this day, some 5 decades later, only one man has ever been in prison for the crime. This is the full narrative of the Luwapa heist, the real story behind the Goodfellas. The man behind the Luwapa heist, or really any crime quite like it, surely could not be pulled off in the same way today. But in 1970, New York, a lot of things happened that could not be pulled off today, thanks to the mafia. Now, the 1970s and early 80s marked a apex of crime in modern New York City history, and a lot of that had to do with the 5 families in New York mafia: Bruno, Colombo, Gumbo, all these famous gangs, had the run of their share of the city, with at least one of them behind almost every major crime committed during their heyday. In this case, the heist it was the Luke Sheep family, especially one of their associate named Jimmy Burke. That was the mastermind. That must be Jimmy Burke right there, mastermind. So Jimmy played Robert De Niro. Jimmy Conway was the uncharacteristic sort of mafia man in the that he was an Irish American, not Italian American. His heritage was both a blessing and as a curse. Not being Italian meant he couldn't be a made man, but it was also meant he could act as a free agent of sorts, while other associates found themselves hopelessly bound to the family. Jimmy Burke was free to make his own alliance. And make alliance he did. As a young man, Burke became an associate of the Lucci family and began working the streets for them. Ultimately, it was Burke who led the heist. Now, Jimmy Burke began plotting the mass robbery at JFK. The plan took sharp at Robert's Lounge, the tavern Ozark Park neighborhood of Queens that was owned by Burke and served as a hub for criminals, and the spot where dirty deals were made. On a particular evening, Robert's Lounge, Burke, associated with Henry Hill, portrayed as Ray in The Goodfellas, met with the bookmaker, associate of his name, Martin. Now, Martin provided him with information that spawned the heist. Now, information concerning $6 million in untraceable cash and jewelry, all relatively easy access and easy to steal. According to Coleman, who gotten his information from JFK airport worker who owed him money named Lewis. There was a vault in the Luapa Airline Terminal, John F. Kennedy International Airport, that was used monthly for the transport and the stage of currency. 1 month million of dollars in untraceable American currency would be flown into JFK, the result of voluntary exchange made for servicemen and tourists in West Germany. Now, Burke knew it was easy to steal because it had been done before. Several years prior, $22,000 in cash was stolen from the wall height before Warner himself. Now, in exchange for that hefty sum, Burke agreed to orchestrate the heist for Lucci's family over the course of several months. He plotted alongside Warner, Kaufman, and associate who knew the inner working of the airport and how security worked. Warner even supplied Burke with information on where to park, what time to enter, and how long they should stay inside. Meanwhile, Burke began assembling his team for the heist. Now, Tommy, Simon Engel, Sue Lewis, Joe, Tony, and Joseph, and Joe Roberts, who was chosen from the Lucci family, along the Paulo, a representative of Gumbo family. In addition, Burke's like his own son, Frank, associate of his name, Parnell, Sack Edwards, to serve as a driver. Now, Simon and his gang, Burke's gang, were pulled off the heist themselves in a stolen Ford Econoline Ford van. Driven by Edwards. Now, Frank waited outside the airport and crashed the car. Now, the vehicle literally intended to crash into police cars. should any approach the airport while the men were still inside. Other associates were also looped in for outside jobs. Paul, a captain in the Lucci family, sent his son Paul to ensure that his end of the loot was secure. Now, Vincent Crime Crew, chief of Barnwell family, was also looped in, associated with payments as the crime would be committed by Lucci men in Barnwell territory. And of course, Jimmy would orchestrate from afar and be responsible for tying up any loose ends. So the dramatic story of how the heist got unfolded. Now the stolen van sat outside the terminal in the early morning hours, December 11th, just as planned at 3:12 a.m. A cargo agent named Carey noticed the car and went to investigate immediately. He was a pistol whipped and dragged inside the van. His wallet was taken and his family was threatened, faced with no choice. Now Wallen agreed to cooperate. The heist had begun. Now Wallen was being held. Another agent heard the commotion and went to investigate as well. As he entered the loading dock, 6 armed men in ski masks ambushed him with the key that had been provided by Warner. Now the man entered the building and rounded up the remaining employees, sequencing them all in a break room. Using the bloody and beaten Wallen as proof that they were not there to play games. Now, after rounding up all employees, one of Luigi's members ordered a senior cargo agent to call Rudy, had told them was the only man with the code to get through the vault 2-door system. Now, after Eric was summoned, Vita rose about the technical problem with the cargo. He was forced to activate the doors, which he was surprised the masked man with such intensive knowledge of. However, Warner had fully briefed Burkeman beforehand. He had explained that the double door system was extremely important, as a misstep could result in the security system being activated. If that happened, there was no chance for escape. Port Authority police could have the entire airport locked down in less than 90 seconds. The first floor had to be unlocked, opened, then closed, and relocked before the second door was opened. Upon exit, the second door had to close and lock before the first could be opened again. As a precaution, Berkman had Urich open the first door, then wait with them in the chamber between the second door while they go to the cargo. Now, Berkman forced Urich at gunpoint to lie on the ground while they shift through the cargo manifest, deciding which parcel to steal when the moment was right. Once the 40 or so parcels were selected, Urich was made to unlock the second door. The cargo was then loaded into the chamber and the second door was relocked. After the outer doors was unlocked, one man returned Urich at gunpoint to the break room where the rest of the employees were being held under guard. By 4:16, all the cargo had been loaded into the van. Then the local employees were then instructed not to make any phone calls until 4:30, giving Burke's men roughly 15 minutes buffer to escape. At 4:20, the van pulled out of the loading dock, and true to their word, and under threat of death, the Wafa employees waited 14 minutes to alert authorities. By the time they arrived, there wasn't a sign of Burke's man in sight. In just 64 minutes, the heist was over. Burke's men had pulled off the country's greatest heist, leaving $5 million in cash and $1 million in jewelry, roughly $2 million, Paul when adjusted inflation. And they had gotten away with it for the time being. Now, the perfect crime began to unravel with stacks of Edward's one fatal mistake. The heist could have been the perfect crime had it not been for one man's selfish mistake. On December 13th, 2 days after the heist, police received a call from a patrol officer reporting a large van parked in a no parking zone, Conridge, Brooklyn. From the looks like it, the patrol officer said it matched the description of the van given by the employees. Now, police investigation fingerprint expert immediately rushed to the scene, impounded the car, believing it would be the same Ford van seen at JFK. Upon further investigation, it belongs to one Pernell Edwards. Now, of course, Edward was never questioned by the police, as he's been taken care of by Jimmy the Ghent for his misstep. But the tale of his grave mistake soon came to light. Edward had been tasked with disposing the Ford Econoline van after the money had been moved. Immediately following the heist, he had been told to take the van to a car compactor in New Jersey and get rid of it. Unfortunately, Edward wasn't quite as adopted at the following the rules as he was robbing the airport. Instead, he heading right to New Jersey. Edward took a detour to his girlfriend's house, Carnage. On the way, and indulged in a joint or two, and ended up parking his stolen, very much being searched for the van in no parking zone. After indulging yet again, this time in alcohol and cocaine, Edward proceeded to pass out and forgot about the van. Upon hearing about Edward's mistake, Jimmy Burke decided it was time to take matters in his own hands in order to keep his associates, also almost all of them, from making their mistakes or talking to the cops. Now, Jimmy Burke cleaned up the loose ends in the aftermath of the robbery. So, how did Jimmy Burke guarantee everyone signs after the heist, but not being fussy about who had to kill in order to get it? After all, dead men tell no tales. According to Henry Hill, who later became invaluable witness for the government and help out Burke, among other jailers, Edward's mistake sent Burke into the state of high anxiety. According to the FBI, it had only taken them 3 days after finding the van to pinpoint Burke as the mastermind and his crew as predators. And Burke was feeling the heat. Now, Val Hill claimed that he would kill anyone who might be able to implicate him in the heist. And before long, that precious what Burke did. Now, Edward Finley was the first victim killed at his apartment by Tommy and Engel. Now, next was Krigman. After that came several of the gunmen Burke had enlisted, along with a few of their immediate family members, with 6 months. Also, everyone involved in the heist was dead or missing, even Frank Burke and Jimmy's son, either by Burke's own hand or thanks to a associate of his. Now, Vincent and the final chapter of the heist. Now, when Jimmy Burke, having killed off virtually all of the heist gang, there was almost no one left to go to prison. If they actually been caught, even now, 40 years after the heist, only one man has ever served time for the direct involvement with the crime. Lewis Warner was arrested 4 months after the heist, proving the robbery with information regarding to the terminal layout. He was convicted in May 1979 and served 15 years in prison. Now, in 1980, Henry was arrested for narcotic trafficking, fearing Burke would have him killed. As a way to prevent him from cooperating with authorities, Hill did just that and volunteered to be informant for the FBI to exchange for protection. After proving the authorities with decades worth of information, Burke and others entered the witness protection program and disappeared. Now, both Burrow and Burke didn't go to prison following Hill's cooperation, but neither case had anything to do with the heist. Burrow was arrested on racketeering, gambling, and loan sharking charges, while Burke was arrested for his part in a basketball point shaving scheme. Both of them died in prison, Navarro in 1988 and Burke in 1996. Finally, in 2014, 36 years later, the heist, it seems there might finally be another arrest involving a direct player. Vincent, the crime chief of Bruno family, was arrested in connection with the heist. At the age of 78, he went to trial and ultimately denied he had anything to do with the heist, and claim also backed up by Hill before his death in 2012. Was credited for all the charges, made a free man again. However, it soon seemed the fate of Burke and Varro would befell us to Sorrow 2 in 2017. He was arrested on the road rage incident and sentenced to 8 years prison. Whatever Sorrow may or may not know about the heist could very well died with behind bars. It was with Burke, as Burke's fictional counterpart told a young Henry Godfellows, never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut. It would seem as though Burke's real associate mostly held true to Crusoe's, or were killed before they had a chance to break it. Either way, to this day, the heist remains one of the largest, not mentioned the bloodiest and most story open case in American history. After look at this heist, read the story of Henry Hill's wife, Karen, then read Billy Bates. Those who murder was too gruesome, even for the good fellows. Well, there you go and stuff. I'll get off here. Hey, thanks for all coming. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys all later. Bye now.